Hello everyone, this will be part 1 of chapter 22 of Regular Boy Daniel Wayne, written by Diamond Rosie and read by Insect Overlord. This chapter is titled All for the Games. Twitter, Daily Planet. Check out our latest video interview with a surprise guest, link. After much back and forth and an hour-long group call, Danny had finally convinced Sam, Tucker, Val, and Wes that telling people he was an ice meta was not a suicidal decision. Well, Tucker and Wes had mostly been on his side from the beginning. It had been Sam and Val who thought he was trying to pin the GIW on himself. Sighing to himself, Danny collapsed into bed, sinking into the plush mattress. His phone vibrated in his hand with a call. "Seriously, guys," he mumbled to himself, pulling the phone up, surprised by the caller ID. "Adam?" Answering, Danny puts the phone up to his ear. "Hey, Adam," Danny starts cheerily. "How you been, Danny?" Adam greeted happily, the sound of cars whistling past on his end of the phone. He must not be home yet. "I've been great. Supposed to start at some rich kid's school in a few days. I've been kind of nervous about that," Danny admitted honestly, sitting up now. Adam's laugh blended in with the sound of a door opening. "Don't you go worrying about those kids. I met enough of them to know you got twice the brain any of them have." The cars were more distant now, but Adam's feet hit the floor heavily. He must have been going up the stairs. "You think so?" "No, so." "You on your way home now?" Danny paced around the large open space of his room as he spoke, periodically eyeing the listening device that was still in the vents. "Yeah," Adam sighed heartily. "Had a project I needed to start cracking at." Keys jingled distantly, and there was the sound of a door unlocking. "Already? Didn't classes start 2 weeks ago?" "Ain't it just the life?" Adam laughed sardonically. There was some shuffling before he spoke again. His tone shifted away from the jovial chipperness that almost seemed like a permanent quality in his voice, to a more tentative and serious tone. "I saw your interview with them Metropolis folk earlier." "Oh, yeah?" Danny laughed. "Wes gave me an earful about that." He waited to see what Adam was poking at. "I got my share of it, believe me." Adam huffed in fond annoyance that made Danny smile. "Listen, Danners, I got the morning off tomorrow. No class, no work. Think you want to catch the sights with me?" The old nickname sounded strange with the nervousness that Danny could sense in his tone. Adam was never nervous. In fact, he had a faulty calmness about him. Danny couldn't help but wonder what had him on edge like that. "Yeah, you got a place in mind?" He agreed easily. "I'll come pick you up. How's 11 sound?" "You sure? I heard we're kind of out of the way." Bristol, where Wayne Manor was, Danny had learned, was outside of the city but still considered in Gotham for more of the symbolism of it. Something about the royal Gotham family or something. It had been pretty evident in the few times he had gone out. "It'll be my excuse to see your place. Heard some crazy things about it, you know," Adam said, more chipper now, but there was still something off about his tone that Danny couldn't quite catch. With a promise of spending the day together tomorrow, Adam ended the call. Danny knew that Adam wanted to talk to him about something. In the way his tone shifted, it was obvious it was something Adam thought required a face-to-face. Danny was thankful for it, given the ears and eyes he had to hide from in the manor when certain topics were broached. Danny explained to Alfred and Bruce that a friend of his would be coming by and they were going to spend the day in the city over breakfast. They were fortunately pretty easygoing about that matter, and told him to call if anything went wrong, or felt like it was going to go wrong, or if he needed money, or if he needed a ride back, or if he was hurt, or if... "There's an Adam here for you, young Master Danny." Grabbing his phone from the table, "Don't take things from strangers," Bruce tried to prattle on as he and Alfred followed him to the door. "Even if they tell you it's safe, and steer clear from anyone wearing a mask that's not for medical reasons. And if there's a gaseous substance in the air, do you have a gas mask?" "I'm going downtown, Bruce, not a war zone." Danny tried to placate, unable to hide his laugh, taking the spare gas mask from Alfred as he opened the door for him. "Have a safe trip, young Master Danny." "See you later," Danny waved, making his way to Adam's car. "Alfred, do you think—" Danny caught Ruth starting before the door was fully closed and before he had made it all the way down the stairs. Alfred cut him off pointedly. "May I remind you of your job, sir? One that you were meant to be present at an hour ago?" And the door closed with a light click. "Your carriage awaits, young master." Adam snickered in a fake British accent as Danny slid into the passenger seat. "Shut up," Danny huffed, embarrassed as he clicked his seatbelt into place. Looking up, Danny realized he recognized the car. "You fix her up?" Danny asked, surprised, running his hand along the center console. "Yup." Adam puffed his chest in pride as they left the manor gates. One of the clients at the mechanic shop they both worked for in Amity brought in a car that was on its last limb. Most of the guys in the shop were surprised he even managed to bring it in. The owner said he couldn't afford to fix it, and it'd probably just be better for him to get a new one. Adam had gone up to him and told him he'd take it off his hands for a couple $100. Considering the guy was gonna scrap it, he was more than happy to give it to Adam. They spent the summer before Adam left for college fixing her up. He'd taken it off with him, even though a few more things needed doing. They talked about the specifics of it and how she was doing for most of the ride into town. The conversation was light, and they decided to grab a drink from a cafe and walk around near the park for a while. There was a small lull after Adam told him about his classes, where they sat on the park bench and under a shade of smoggy clouds. "Danny, there weren't many people at the park, even though it was midday now. Maybe a Gotham thing?" "Yeah?" There were a few shades and shadows floating around. That was definitely a Gotham thing. Metropolis didn't have half as many shades, probably because the crime rates were lower there, and you never told me you're meta. Adam didn't look at him, instead staring at the empty cup of slowly melting ice in his hands. Danny wasn't sure what to say. Danny trusted Adam, just the way he trusted Jazz and Sam and Tucker and Val and Wes. "Listen, Adam," Danny tried, guilt heavy in his chest. Danny never told Adam that he was Phantom, 'cause it never mattered. Sure, Adam would gush about the stints Phantom would pull off, but so did everyone in his class, and that just seemed so showboating. And Adam deserved to be told properly, not for some extra cool points. "You're Phantom, aren't you?" His Tennessee accent mixed with a bit of Gotham twang, his tone even and serious. He didn't look at Danny. It would be easy for Danny to lie his way out of it, making it just a coincidence. After all, Phantom was just a ghost, and Danny, to the knowledge of many, was very much alive. Phenotypically, they looked less and less alike as time passed. It would be an easy sell. Plenty of people were metas. Ice wasn't a rare of a power. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you before," Danny admitted quietly. Adam let out a relieved sigh, either because he had been right or Danny hadn't lied to him. Finally looking at him, "Nah, I get it. You can't go around telling just anyone." Adam tried to laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No," Danny said quickly. Adam blinked at his outburst. "No, the reason I didn't want to tell you isn't 'cause you were just anyone." Danny looked at a group of boys crawling together under a tree a few feet away from them, as he tried to find his words and his spine. "I told Jazz and Tucker and Sam, well, I never told Jazz, he kind of figured it out. But there was always something phantom or something ghostly happening. You know," he tried weakly. "It wasn't like that with you, and I didn't have to think about what I wasn't doing, I guess. It was just us, and cars, and hockey, and school, and whatever else." The excuse sounded pathetic, even to Danny's ears, and guilt twisted in his gut. But Adam took in his words. "I had my suspicions, you know. Never seen you two in the same room and all that. And Wes went on for hours I figured he had some kind of weird crush on you, so I didn't think too much about it." He grimaced at what had gone down at the Nasty Burger when the topic was finally exposed. "Guess he was right, huh?" "You're not mad?" Danny asked hesitantly, ignoring the teen's conversation that only got louder. "Nah, but you totally owe me for that." He shoved Danny playfully with his shoulder, an easy smile on his face. "Name your price," Danny agreed happily. "I'ma save it for a rainy day." Adam gave him a wicked grin, and Danny rolled his eyes. "Ugh, I can't believe that crap face," one of the teens from under the tree yelled, outraged. The voice was loud enough to make both Adam and Danny flinch in their spots, a decent distance away. "How could he just go quit like that?" Another piped up, fuming. There were sports duffel bags and other equipment carriers spread around the group. Looking closer, Danny could notice some of their hoodies were the same, with an orange and white fox design on their black hoodies. And right before regionals, Danny realized he recognized the equipment carriers. He had a few of them back in middle school when he played hockey. They were hockey equipment, meaning those were hockey players. Danny listened intently to their conversation. One of them said something too quiet for Danny to hear, but the first guy seemed rowdy. "Don't you tell me to calm down, McGinns." He pointed an accusatory finger. He knew what we were putting on the line. We could have beat the Robins this year. "He made us toss," the second one added on. McGinn said something again, and both boys lowered their voices, but their irritation at the situation was obvious. Danny looked over to meet Adam's eyes. He raised a questioning brow at Danny, who just grinned in return. Fortunately, the hockey team was easy enough to find, even though none of them were wearing their jerseys. Gotham's Arctic Foxes. They were one of the older teams in Gotham, citing to have been around at least 90 years, which explains why they didn't stick with Gotham's bat and bird-themed mascots the other teams Danny had looked into had. After the doctor's checkup, Bruce had given Danny the go-ahead to joining whatever team he wanted, and left it up to Danny to find one that he wanted to join. The only problem had been that there were so many teams in Gotham. It had been a bit intimidating, if Danny had to be honest. The team's gym wasn't far from the park, which is probably why they were there in the first place. Adam tagged along as Danny asked if they had any openings for their hockey team. They handed him some paperwork to fill out. "Figured you gotta ask your folks," Adam asked, eyeing the forms in Danny's hands. Well, Bruce had said Danny could join, but he wasn't entirely sure how far that permission went. Tim had assured Danny many times that Bruce wouldn't be so hard on him about the things he wanted to do, so long as he could keep tabs on him. Gotham was a dangerous city, so it made sense. But Danny had only stayed with them for a little over a week, and he didn't want to push any hard boundaries. It was better safe than sorry. So, Danny pulled out his phone. It barely rang even once before Bruce's frantic voice came through the other side. "Danny, are you okay? Did something happen? Are you hurt? I'll send Alfred. Actually, I'm probably closer. I'll come get you." Danny sent an alarmed look to Adam, who raised a curious brow since he couldn't hear Bruce. No, I'm fine. You don't have to come." "Are you sure? It's no problem. Would you prefer somebody else come? I can have Jason come get Bruce." Danny tried to sound grounding, not sure what exactly the man was so stressed about. "I was just calling to tell you that I was, going to sign up for a hockey team. Or, try out. I'm not sure I'll get in yet. I just heard they had an opening." Bruce was silent for a moment, and Danny could hear someone trying to get his attention with a "Mr. Wayne." Was he at work? But he'd answered Danny's call so fast. "Oh." Bruce sighed with a relieved laugh. "You can join any team you like, Danny. You have my card, and can put whatever payment you need on it. I can have Alfred order whatever gear you need, if you like." "No, that's fine. I'd rather pick them out myself." Reconsidering his words, "If that's okay?" There was another Mr. Wayne. It was the same voice, but closer and more urgent sounding. Bruce's voice was muffled when he spoke next. "Mr. Sure, I'm talking to my son." He sounded annoyed, and his tone was harder than it was a second ago. "And if you like your position in the company, I suggest you wait until I'm done." There was a quiet, "Yes, sir." So he was at work. "I didn't know you were busy." It was 12:47 p.m. Of course he was busy. "Sorry." "Oh, I'm not busy. You can call me any time," Bruce said confidently and easily, and Danny couldn't help but think of all the unanswered calls he'd left in the past few years. "There's no need to apologize. I hope you do well on your..." He paused. "Audition," he tried questioningly. Danny laughed lightly, knowing he'd used that since Cass and Steph both did performance arts. "Thanks. I'll let you know how it goes." "Are you sure you don't need anything?" "Yep." Danny looked down at the forms in his lap and gave Adam a silent thumbs up. The redhead returned with all the silent cheer Danny knew him to hold. "I'll see you at home then. Bye." "See you at home, Danny," Bruce said warmly. It wasn't until the call had already ended when Danny realized he had referred to Wayne Manor as his home. Danny filled out the form and remembered to correct his last name before he gave it back to the lady at the desk. She looked over it, bored, until her eyes squinted suspiciously. She looked up at Danny analytically, typed something into her computer, then looked back and forth between the form, the computer, and Danny, eyes going wide. "You're, She cleared her throat, and Danny couldn't understand why she was suddenly so flustered. "Interested in the hockey team? Here, the hockey team, here." "Yes?" Danny had already told her that, and he couldn't help but feel confused, and Adam's knowing look wasn't helping. "The, team went on a break." She checked the watch on her wrist. "They're not due back for another 40 minutes. The coach is still here, Mark Adrian. That's his name. The coaches, I mean, for hockey. I could give him a call and see if he'd want to see if you want to, be a good fit for the team." "Oh, yeah, that would be great." Danny smiled, happy that this was working out so well. "Of course, Mr. Wayne." The lady smiled nervously. "If you'd like to, take a seat there, I'll let you know." Wayne. Of course. Danny had completely forgotten in the mundanity of seeing Bruce so regularly that he was Bruce Wayne. Like the richest, most influential guy ever, and basically owned Gotham, which was where Danny was now. And he was also, very publicly, Danny's father, because Danny was Daniel Wayne, brother to Dick Grayson, the it boy of the century, second only to Bruce himself, Timothy Drake Wayne, the fastest-growing name in tech since computers were invented, and Damian Wayne, the mysterious and elusive heir to Wayne Enterprise. "Right," Danny finally squeezed out. "Okay," and turned away before the lady could add anything else. Adam, easily catching his mood shift, was right beside him. "What's wrong?" Adam asked softly, sitting in the same spot he had before. The seats were far enough that Danny couldn't catch the conversation the lady was having on the phone, which meant she couldn't hear them either. Danny kneaded his lips together. "What if they're only letting me try out 'cause..." He trailed out, not finishing the sentence. His shoulders hunched inwards, and Danny's earlier excitement of playing hockey again was already muddled. Adam hummed thoughtfully. "They might be." Danny frowned at the confirmation. "But they're tryouts, Danny. If the coach, whatever his name was, only lets you on the team 'cause who your dad is, then you ought to know this isn't the team you need to join." He gave Danny a light shove. "Course I'll be watching, and if your coach isn't gonna give it to you for sucking at a sport you haven't played in 4 years, I sure as hell will." Danny had actually met Adam a lot earlier than he'd become friends with Wes. The Weston brothers moved to Amity when Danny and Wes were in 5th grade, and Adam was in 7th with Jazz. Danny and Wes knew of each other, but they never saw each other enough organically to become friends, until Wes figured out that Danny was Phantom and began trailing them. Not that that was entirely organic either. Danny had met Adam earlier than that because he worked at the ice rink Danny's team used to practice at. Eventually, Adam somehow managed to become one of the coach's assistants, even though he was still in middle school, and they had a pretty decent friendship until Danny was forced to quit. The lady's heel tapped closer, and Danny settled for a thankful smile and turned to see a shaggy-looking man with deep gray eyes and a windbreaker in the same colors as the jerseys he'd seen earlier. He trailed behind the woman with a tired and annoyed look in his eyes, and seemed very bored to be here. The lady reached a reasonable distance and turned to address the man behind her. "This is Danny, actually." Adam was quick to cut in, leaning back in his chair easily. "We don't need introductions, Linda." The man was clearly annoyed to be there. "He says he wants to play hockey. I'm not going to bother learning a useless name if he can't even skate." The lady, Linda, seemed horrified at the way the man was behaving. "I know how to skate." Danny didn't like how childish his voice sounded. Trying to amend, he stood now that he was addressed. "I played hockey before. I was a defenseman." The man, presumably the aforementioned Coach Mark Adrian, eyed him appraisingly. "You said played." "I got into an accident a few years back and couldn't play." He nodded thoughtfully. "We happen to have recently acquired an opening." He turned, with a small gesture for Danny to follow him. "You better be good enough to deserve ruining my break, kid." "My name's Danny." Danny jogged lightly to keep in pace. "I don't care if your name's Buddha." He glanced back at Danny. "You didn't bring any equipment." They walked through a pair of double doors, and the temperature cooled. Danny said dumbly, glancing at his empty hands as if they would appear. "What's your foot size?" The man walked behind the counter of the skate rentals and handed Danny the one he needed. Once they confirmed that they were the right fit, he said, "Here's a stick. You break it and suffer the consequences. Noah's not very forgiving." Despite the years since the last time Danny had played hockey properly, the warm-ups and exercises Coach Adrian made him do seemed to come to him naturally. Adam watched quietly from the stands. After the laps and the traveling with the puck and half the court shots, Adrian finally stepped onto the ice. Tennis shoes switched out for skates and a hockey stick in hand. "You score on me, you got the spot. No questions asked." Goal in mind and in view, Danny was determined. Now that he'd actually tested the ice shavings and the momentum of skating that had made flying his phantom almost second nature, there was no way he was going to be denied. The puck was placed center court. A sharp whistle sounded, and Adrian was in motion. Danny was intending to have the puck first, but Adrian had managed to snag it, sticks colliding. Adrian skated towards the goal, but Danny was on his trail. Within moments, they were locked in a close battle of ownership over the puck. The short seconds it was in Danny's possession wasn't enough for him to be able to switch to defensive. Adrian was clearly a seasoned player, but he was a veteran, and while Danny may have also been a veteran only minutes ago, he was a lot more agile and faster than the taller, larger, and older man. In a split-second decision, Danny, instead of attempting to steal the puck back for the umpteenth time, knocked it away from both of their reach. Adrian was thrown off by the unorthodox and very risky play, but in the time it took him to register what had happened, Danny had slipped right under his outstretched arm towards the stray puck. Adrian spun fast, gaining on Danny, but with his head start and speed, the puck was clean in the net before Adrian made up the distance. Pulling that play in a game with multiple players would have been an incredibly risky move, but since this had been a 1v1, the move had ensured Danny's victory. He spun around, chest heaving lightly as Adrian approached him. "Welcome to the team, Danny," he said, instead of commenting on Danny's decision. Danny couldn't stop the grin that split his face. "Is that my effing stick?" a boy yelled, outraged, from off the ice, dirty blonde hair strewn messily on his head, an accusatory finger aimed at Danny. "Stand down, Noah, I gave it to him." Danny's new coach vouched for him, giving him a light head gesture to follow him to the stands where a group of boys from the park had gathered, all eyeing Danny suspiciously. Danny had barely made it to the barrier out of the ice when Noah snatched the hockey stick out of his hand. "Get your own crap," he hissed, green eyes venomous, and turned away. "Sorry," Danny mumbled, the ecstasy of his victory evicted for shaky nerves and nauseous anxiety. One of the taller boys, with dark hair and dark eyes, looked at Danny like he was a complex physics problem. He turned to Coach Adrian instead of addressing Danny personally. "You let him score on you." His voice was calm and hard, but that only made the accusation hit harder. "I didn't let him do anything," Adrian said offhandedly, sitting down to take his skates off, giving his calves a small massage. Turning to Danny, "Practices every day except Tuesday and Thursdays, 11 on the weekends, 5 on school days. Have your gear by tomorrow or don't show up. Leave your skates on the counter. I'll see you when I see you," Coach Adrian said, all in one breath, while wordlessly telling the others to gear up and hit the ice. Danny nodded, and Adam followed him away from the crowd of at best curious but mostly annoyed and angry eyes. "Coach, you can't be serious," one of the boys said, appalled, initiating the chatter of backlash. "He's built like a dried-up fry. He's gonna crack before the ice does. Prelims are in 2 weeks. You can't expect him to be any good before then." The tall boy from earlier spoke up, and they stopped to listen. "We'll see if he's any good when he shows up." A pause. His back is turned to Danny, but his words are pointed like Artemis's arrows. "If he ever does." Coach added after a while. His indifferent voice seemed almost gentle amongst the animosity. "We're short a player anyway. If you want to stand any kind of chance at the preliminaries, shut your yapping and hit the ice." There were grumbles and groans, but they were muffled by the sound of blades skidding on ice and flying shavings as the double doors swung closed behind Danny. Danny showed up to practice Sunday morning at 10:26. He'd gone to get all the gear he would need. It felt surreal to be walking into the ice ring with a bag full of hockey gear, and Danny thought that maybe things would be good for him now. Maybe he could put Chicago behind him. Maybe he could forget what it was like to feel his core crack at the seams, and the horrible sight of green dripping onto his arms. Maybe Wayne's didn't have Chicago's, and maybe Danny could be like them. The guy driving the Zamboni parked the large machine to the side, dipped his head in a silent greeting, and headed off, leaving Danny alone until practice actually started. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, Danny put his skates on, lacing up the too stiff material in the pattern he always did, and waddled onto the ice. After the GIW had the martial law locked down a few months after the Pariah Dark incident, flying around as Phantom was a risk. Even invisibility wasn't enough to cover him anymore. After the months Danny had spent in the realms with Firebolt, he saw exactly what he would be risking when he put his neck on the line for stunts he wouldn't have given a second thought to before. It wasn't a risk he wanted to take. Not anymore. But the freedom that came when gravity would finally let go of its reins was something Danny sorely missed. Every feeling, every worry would melt away, lost in the dust behind him. While they were bound by the rules of physics dictatorship, he was free. A feeling that Danny could most closely replicate on the ice. It wasn't the same, but it was close. Danny had been so entranced that he hadn't even heard the doors of the ice rink open, and hadn't realized he wasn't alone until he spun around and was met face to face with the dark-haired guy from yesterday. The curious, quizzical look hadn't seemed to have left him, his sudden presence freezing Danny in surprise. Hoping to make a good first impression, Danny decided to try to be amicable with the greeting. The boy beat him to it, sticking out a hand. "I'm Asher, or Ash, either's fine." His voice had an easy drawl to it, now that he didn't seem repulsed by Danny's presence. His accent didn't match the ones the others on the team had. "I'm Danny, nice to meet you." Danny took his hand to shake. There was a little laugh. "Yeah, I know. Wayne, right?" Danny nodded again. "I'm the captain, and I play for defense. My number's 23. Ash turned easily to face the doors when they sounded, and introduced the team members as they walked in minutes after each other. A boy almost a head taller than Danny, with unbrushed brown hair and equally dark eyes and pale skin. That's Benjamin Henderson. Call him Benji before he says you can. Prepare to get stabbed. He's one of the forwards for the second line, your lineup. Henderson headed straight for the bleachers and strapped his skates on, and didn't even look in Danny's direction when he got on the ice. The ice rink only got more crowded with time. That's Keith Cartman. Ash pointed out a dark-skinned boy with ear-length beaded dreadlocks. He's the goalkeeper. And over there, Danny looked over at the pale kid, green eyes glaring at Danny, dark blonde hair pulled out of his face in a half updo. Levi Evans, 65. He'll be in the lineup with you. Danny was becoming very aware as what looked like the whole team was notably taller than him, including the ones Ash had pointed out to be freshmen. Danny wasn't short. He evened out with most kids in his grade, but he felt like a sapling next to the tall heaps of muscle he had decided to share a team with. Ash had named all the other players, their positions and numbers, but they had only landed in a jumbled mess in Danny's head as he nodded along to the explanation. Most of the boys, a total of 12 not counting himself, were standing around lazily on the ice and doing familiar stretches until Coach Adrian walked in, coffee in hand. Moments later, another boy ran into the room, his hopeful expression dropping as Coach turned around lazily to address him. You know the drill, Hess. With a groan, the blond boy slipped his bag off his shoulders and dropped into a plank position. Danny must have seemed confused, since Asher leaned his head down the distance to match Danny's height. Coach has a hard rule that you have to show up before he does, or you plank for every minute you're late. Danny grimaced at the thought as he followed the rest of the team through their stretches and drills. Danny would have had to be deaf and blind to not notice that his new teammates weren't particularly excited to have him on the team, but none of them had outwardly expressed anything, mostly just sending him annoyed or dirtied looks and the occasional middle finger, and kept a wide berth between themselves and him, like they wanted to make sure Danny knew he was still an outsider. Message received. Danny. Coach gestured for him to come closer, slinging him out from the crowd of boys. He easily skated over to him, nerves bundling in his stomach. Once Danny stood by his side, he silently beckoned to the crowd again. Danny hadn't been sure who it was at first, but the look of annoyance on Henderson and Evans, who Ash had already pointed out to be his potential line members, painted the picture clearly to Danny. You said you played defense on your old team, Coach questioned. Yes, sir. Danny put his hands behind him so his nervous fiddling wouldn't be obvious. I'm putting you on the forwards, second line. We've recently had an opening. Henderson clicked his tongue at that, and Evans frowned. Danny remembered the conversation from the park. He gestured to the two boys on his other side. Get comfortable. We'll be having a practice round. None of the three boys moved their spots on the ice after Coach skated toward the center of the small crowd and announced the mini teams of their practice match. Danny, Henderson, and Evans were the forwards for their team, with Samuel Hess and Harper Barton as their defensemen. They were playing against Ash and his co-defender, Logan Meadows, along with Noah Skinner, Liam Waterman, and Theo Velasquez. Keith was the goalie for Danny's team, while Ethan Hudson, one of the forwards from the third lineup, was the goalie for Ash's team. Ethan's other line members had been assigned to work on their drills off the ice while they played. As the puck ran its course around the ice rink, Danny was able to pick up on particular skills of his teammates. Ash, he had quickly noticed, had an almost unbreakable defense and was only made better by Logan's steady hand and backup. Danny hadn't been able to get the puck past them easily. Keith's incredible skills as a goalie was all that kept them at bay. Despite their incredible defense, though, Noah, Liam, and Theo had a shaky lineup. Liam had a tendency to hesitate before passing, which would lose them precious seconds, and leave him open to get the puck stolen from. Noah tried to overcompensate for that by always trying to keep the puck to himself, which, naturally, could only get him so far. Between the two of them, Theo, who seemingly had the most amicable distribution of abilities in the lineup but lacked Noah's ferocity, often was left in the back of the pack. Ethan was clearly new to being a goalie, and while he managed to deflect a few attempts at the puck getting into the net, his movements weren't optimal. On his own team, Danny noticed that Evans and Henderson seemed much more comfortable passing to each other than their opposing forwards, but there was a large gap in their plays where Danny suspected a third member was expected to perform. Danny hadn't yet learned of their planned maneuvers or attacks, and was lacking in cohesiveness with them. Hess and Barton, who did not have the same teamwork disparity as Danny's lineup, were no match for Ash and Logan in terms of defense. The mock game had come to an end when one team reached 3 points. Danny's team huffed at their loss as Danny followed them as they gathered for the debriefing. Danny was pleased to find that most of his earlier observations had been mimicked by the coach as he pointed out their mistakes and told them how they should fix it. For the rest of practice, while Benjamin and Levi weren't exactly singing his praises, they seemed notably less scornful of his presence on the team after the match. Danny stood with Tim and Steph, waiting for Alfred to come pick them up from school. It had been a little over a week of Danny having joined the Foxes, and their first game of the season was coming up soon. And while Danny was no longer treated like dead weight, he hadn't exactly earned their favor yet. Of course, this wasn't the most optimal outcome of Danny's first time playing hockey after 4 years, but he was willing to accept his losses. If they really disliked him so much by the end of the season, he'd just look into joining another team, even if the orange, black, and white jacket had quickly become Danny's go-to. And that's it for part 1 of chapter 22 of Regular Boy Daniel Wayne. I can definitely not read the entire chapter in this part because according to my Kindle, there is over 2 hours left in this chapter alone, and if I go over an hour on my recording app, for some reason it corrupts the entire file. I do not know why, but it is rather annoying. Anyways, thank you all for listening, and I'm sorry for the hiatus of sorts. I got caught up in a lot of stuff. The beginning of this recording was actually recorded in April, that's why there is a large difference. You can probably tell as you're listening through in my environment and how my voice changes. Right now I am recording in an empty room because my entire house is empty, as I am left to clean it for a couple weeks while my family moves to a different house. So I will hopefully have a lot of time to record. But the downside is that my voice will be quite echoey. There isn't really any better options of recording places in this house at the moment. Anyways, I appreciate you all for staying and listening to this story, even though I took quite a long break. Hopefully, I will have more chapters of different stories soon. I'm planning on recording at least 2 a day, though I won't be posting 2 a day. I'm hoping to create a backup of sorts to post. That's the goal, anyway. Yeah, so that's it for now. I hope you all have enjoyed, and thank you for sticking around. And also, thank you so much for listening.